Hey, welcome everybody to the Trialogues podcast. This will be the post-Inman New York edition. My name is Rob Hahn. I am the managing partner for 7DS Associates, and you probably know me as the Notorious Rob for my blog. But I would like to introduce my two partners in crime who have Matthew, Gaylor. Are you guys there?
Yeah, hi guys. It's Matthew from calling in from New York. One of the things I heard actually at the conference is that people have a tendency to what they call chipmunk these introductions of ours. They fast forward through them through the first sort of 4 or 5 minutes once we get done introducing ourselves and chatting about the weather and stuff, and then they actually start sort of 5 or 6 minutes in. So we're going to make the introduction incredibly brief this time, or speak really, really slowly so that when they are forwarding, it actually sounds like.
So basically, we shouldn't be writing. I shouldn't be spending 3 hours writing these intros. Is what
I'm gathering your weather report.
I heard it from maybe like 6 or 7 different people. You know, straight in.
So Gaylor, how are you?
I'm doing well. The weather here is really cold today here in Vermont. Figured I'd, make sure that we got that into the chipmunk as well. But I want to congratulate the two of you. 2/3 of Trialogues is on the Inman 100 influential list. So congratulations, you guys.
Well, that's right. Thank you. Congratulations, Matthew.
Thank you, Rob. And
but Gail, I have to say, I know we have a whole slate lined up, but I do want to kind of address this real quick because this whole thing, it's really an honor. I was kind of blown away to have been named, but I have to wonder, what does this even mean now? Like, what does having influence mean? I don't know that I feel influential. Whereas I look at it, I go, Matthew and Gaylord are incredibly influential. So it's not about the list. It's not about being named or not named. I guess I was just wondering, you guys, what do you think being influential means now in this sort of social information age?
I was thinking about it too, Rob, because I was very surprised and also incredibly flattered to be mentioned on the list. Of course, it's always really nice to be recognized by the industry that you work on. It's sort of like a Golden Globe or something like that, where it's sort of voted on by your peers, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing to sort of experience because, on the one hand, there's sort of like the very basic thing that happens is that all of a sudden you get a lot more Facebook requests and you get a lot more Twitter followers. That is definitely something that happens when you get named to that list.
Right?
So, but in terms of like actually thinking about what your influence might be, it's fascinating because for me that's never something that surfaces as part of what I do here at Corcoran. I don't think of myself that way, and I don't think of the work that I do to be influential. Our objectives and our perspectives and our whole focus is not on the influence discussion at all. So, you have to sort of take a step back from that and say, well, what does it actually mean? And on the one hand, it's like incredibly flattering to be thought of as in that regard, but day to day, it doesn't really change anything for me. It's not going to change the way I work, or the people that I reach out to, or the things that we're interested in, or that kind of stuff. So,
well, one of the things I've noticed, about that particular list, that's been interesting over the years is one is that they've gotten better at kind of describing what it is they're looking for in terms of their specific list. Oftentimes, I've been asked by my editor to kind of give my own feedback in that for my weekly, column or whatever, in terms of people that should be on it or not or whatever. So I've been involved in a little bit, not all of it, but a little bit of the backroom conversations on some of that stuff. And one of the things that really I think is a good thing is that they sort of list out some of what their criteria are for what makes someone influential. Can they affect change within their own organization? Can someone affect change beyond their own organization? that kind of thing. But there's another aspect of using that list that I actually find actually incredibly useful, sort of beyond the sort of, the good feelings that people get when they're on it. And that is, in some ways, it's the Inman 100 list, right? So that's 100 people that Inman is identifying as being worthy of attention from that particular publication. Like, yes, it's definitely, there's a lot of familiar names from the industry in it, but it also sort of shows different, what their different editorial interests are, and what kinds of technology are they interested in, what kinds of voices are they interested in, what kinds of practitioners are they interested in. And sometimes that actually ends up being very insightful, because like I write a column and I'm not like involved in like major editorial decisions. I kind of write whatever I write each week, and they do a great job of cleaning it up and publishing it for me. But it does help to identify, when you look at that list of 100, you can start to see, in the blogger media category, what kinds of voices and what kinds of values are being promoted that the publication as a whole finds useful. So it's kind of sometimes like the artifact itself, to me anyway, is more interesting than the idea of influence, because whether someone's on a list or not on a list, they're influential regardless. And there are a number of people in the industry that are influential that you'd never know what their names are. Like they're the people that everybody kind of goes and talks to and says, oh, is this person for real or not for real? Like people who've got just a good intuition about individuals or a deep technical knowledge on a particular topic that are just never going to surface in a list like that. So those are some of the things that I think of when I review that list, or if I'm asked to give my own kind of 2 bits on some of them sometimes.
Well, I mean, I guess for me, when I was asked the core, is really think about it outside of just this list, right? I mean, what I was wondering about was, what constitutes influence, today when you have social media and you've got all these things, and I think about sort of the wider world, and, you think of some of the top sort of Twitter people that I follow, for example. I'm thinking of guys like Copyblogger or Armano, and I wonder, like, how influential are they, right? Versus, let's say, somebody like Kim Kardashian. I mean, right. Is she influential? I don't know that anyone would look at Kim Kardashian and say that's a positive role model, or that's somebody you want to emulate, or we like and respect it. But, couldn't you argue that she is actually influential in some real sort of dysfunctionally serious way?
Well, I think like the idea of influence, whether it's positive or negative, doesn't that's a whole different issue. What you're saying makes me think of, and I'm hoping, I hope Matthew will maybe lead to this, is some of the ideas of selectivism to some degree, where we can read all of Armano's posts, but if we don't put them into action, then it doesn't matter. Or if someone has a ton of followers and everyone says, yeah, right on, and then goes on living their life the same as always, I'm not sure that that's a bigger deal. And I know, Matthew, you've written a bunch on selectivism. You've kind of nailed it, I think. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a topic very sort of near and dear to my heart, because, one of the core tenets of influence for me is, especially when it comes to digital influence, is what you can make the people that you're connected to online do for you in the real world. For me, influence is all about, how you influence offline things. Mm-hmm. So for somebody like Kim Kardashian, sure, she gets paid to do things like sponsored tweets and stuff like that, but those things do end up as sales, or they do end up as viewership for her TV shows. And to your point, Gaylord, whether you choose to perceive that influence as positive or negative, whether you choose to say, well, is Honey Boo Boo, influential or not, regardless, it's one of the top-rated shows in the country right now. So, you have to sort of strip that kind of thing out and say, well, what is it? How is this person impacting and perhaps changing behavior in the real world? And, for a lot of those people on that list, they do those things. You know, they are able to inform decisions in influential ways that change how the industry works, whether it's from a blogging perspective, like I think Rob does, or whether it's from a business perspective, like some of the CEOs that were named to the list do, in terms of how they define their business strategy. I think a lot of it is really driven by offline influence and getting people to as we've mentioned many times on this show, take action with things, and that's really where it starts to skirt along the slacktivism route, because it isn't necessarily about things like reach or sharing metrics or volume, how social you are, that kind of stuff. It isn't really about this, and this is actually something that came up at the conference itself as part of the international summit that they had there. Is one of the panelists said something incredibly insightful that resonated really, really well with me. She said, it isn't about having, social interaction with people. It's about strategic interaction with people. It's being strategically social. And I just thought it was a really interesting sort of blind spot that a lot of people within the real estate industry sort of fall into the trap of being as social as possible, as opposed to being strategically social. And this person that was saying this was a very, very successful top producer agent, and she had been working the international market for decades. And she said, the kind of socializing I do is based on driving my business. So if I have the business problem where I need to grow my international audience, I'm making strategic partnerships and reaching out socially, strategically, with people like immigration lawyers, for example. And I thought that was a great sort of tactical example of that kind of approach. Gaylord, you were sort of following along with a lot of that international stuff online. Was that your perception?
Yeah.
That stuff too?
Yeah, the international stuff. Like I made a curated version of the main channel that initially some of my friends and some of my clients were like, hey, is there a way to get a channel that doesn't have all the kind of conversational chatter and sponsorship news, just with just the meat in it. And that particular session about international stuff really captured the attention of a ton of the people on Twitter. And I think you're talking, is that, I don't know exactly how to say the woman's name. It's Babayev? Was that who was talking at that time?
Maria Babayev. Yeah.
Yeah, Maria Babayev. So, her part of it really resonated greatly with a lot of people. A lot of people were retweeting bits and pieces of what she was talking about in that section. And they definitely were like, oh, it's not about being social with whoever. It's, she had some really specific, things in there that were, surprise, related to the specific challenges that an international buyer would have coming to the States, like tax issues or legal issues or immigration issues and that kind of,
thing.
That
are dealing with her potential clients. So he's targeting the people that are sort of the conduits to her clients.
Right. And in some ways, it's almost, I suspect, again, it's probably a great place for the Gaylord's disclaimer. I don't know anything about buying or selling real estate, but often, I hear from my clients that, knowing good contractors in your residential area is a great way to, help, your existing and future clients. It's just that instead of it being a plumber or inspectors and that kind of thing, you add onto that another layer of immigration lawyers and finance people. There was a lot of talk about the finance aspects as well during that session. So in some ways, it's just an extension to the once you sit and think about what are the obvious issues that would be faced by someone coming to the U.S. from somewhere else, then it suddenly becomes like, oh yeah, of course, it makes sense to build networks with those types of people strategically. And that's probably the thing. It's well, what do you mean like strategic, social, whatever? And it's just like, well, just making up your mind about how you're going to pursue new business and focusing your efforts in those areas as opposed to just everywhere else. Go ahead.
I agree. I mean, one of the things that comes out of that, of course, is a conversation about who these clients actually are. And one of the things that was really interesting to me as part of that morning session was the conversation about the perception of foreign buyers as being luxury buyers. And obviously there's a lot of attention, either in the media or online or whatever, that the international market is sort of exclusively focused on the top end of the market. So it's luxury condos in Miami and New York and LA or whatever. And whilst that's true to some extent, I thought it was a really interesting perspective that some of the national brokerages started to give, where they said that there's tremendous volume of international business being done at the lower ends of the market. It just doesn't have the attention, or it doesn't have the sort of sexiness, if you like, which is I think the actual word that they used. It doesn't have the sexiness of, you know, the penthouse condos, but it's happening in increasing volume, and it's actually happening, you know, when you actually look at things like dollar amount, it's happening at a higher dollar value than, you know, the fewer higher profile transactions. So,
hey guys, let me ask you a follow up on that exact question, because
sure,
you know, as you know, I couldn't make Inman this year, but what I was following is sort of online, and I asked some questions to people who had attended. You know, what was your biggest takeaway? A lot of folks that's on the international, right, and talk about how business is global and so on. But did this panel, or did you guys get anything, or just comment on it? Was the idea that most of these international clients were family buyers? In other words, they're like the Russian oil tycoon's daughter who wants to move and live in New York City, so she's getting this penthouse, or were they investors? You know, in other words, like some of the lower end buyers that you're talking about, Matthew, I'm just wondering how many of them are looking to purchase because they want to move to the U.S. and actually live here, and how many of them are looking to purchase as investment property? Did you guys get into that at all?
The discussion about this didn't really focus on the demographics of it. It more focused on how can I put it, the type of legal status that this person would have, but it was primarily focused on people moving here as opposed to investing here, because there was a lengthy discussion about employment visas, which sort of segued out of, you know, start networking with immigration lawyers and things like that. But, you know, to try and target, I think they're called EB1s, which is employment-based visa people. Sort of prior to having, you know, temporary residency, and then ultimately sort of things like a green card. But it's something that you get from your employer that you have to sort of prove that you have some sort of exclusivity in, or some unique skill in your particular profession. And it was sort of an important factor in how these people were being described by the panelists. So there was a lengthy discussion about that, but there was no discussion about, you know, demographic makeup, or whether there were families or, you know, anything like that.
Right, no, and the reason why I'm curious about it is because what you mentioned, right? That
actual relocation. That was what they were talking about.
Okay, so that's what really they're talking about, family buyers relocation. But that's the part I find fascinating, is it's the larger brokerages, the larger franchises are talking about, look, international buyers are really active in the lower end of the market. Right? I mean, I guess my mind kind of goes, it has to be investment, no? I mean, why would somebody move?
No. I mean, if it's employment based,
right?
You know, it's certainly you certainly can't draw, you know, a full conclusion that it's investment.
I see what you're saying. I see what you mean.
Right.
Well, that's something I want to check out, man. We're not getting to it on the call, I guess, because I want to look at the number of EB1 visas that are issued versus the number of sales. The reason why I'm asking this is I got recently, you know, got into a couple of discussions with some people around economic data, right? That the notion that the housing market is really recovering and they see lots of positive signs. And the big question I've always had about that are who are the buyers? And you have anecdotes coming out of, say West Coast or Phoenix or parts of the country that says a lot of the buyers are international money. It's foreign investors. And I've never seen any studies. I've never seen any actual data on that. I thought maybe at this panel you guys might have covered it. It's a fascinating question.
Well, Rob, I think Jed Kolko recently put out something in a tweet that was related to that the market's recovering, and that a big component of it is investment. Now I don't know that, and I didn't read the thing. I just follow him on Twitter because I enjoy his work. But I'm just throwing that out there that he may have something in his work may help point in that direction.
Right. No, and like I said, and I saw that. I saw that, and NAR does talk about investment is what's driving a lot of this activity. What they don't break out is how much of the, quote, investment is domestic investment versus foreign investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know
That's what I was going to say. I mean, a lot of the conversation was there was a lot of diversity in terms of who was on the panel and the kind of markets they served and all different levels. You had like an agent, and then you had a CEO, and then national brokerage, individual agent, that kind of stuff. There was, and it would be very difficult for anybody to give anything other than really sort of specific, here's what happens with me type of advice. So the kind of data that you're looking for, Rob, probably wouldn't have surfaced from that kind of panel.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless it had been like a Stan Humphries or a Jed Kolko or somebody like that on there.
So let me bring it back to kind of where you were going before I distracted you with all this discussion of foreign investors and whatnot. If I hear what you're saying correctly, it's that one of the most interesting sort of statements was the notion of being strategically social. And you give the example of this international agent, goes out and tries to really socialize with guys like immigration attorneys or tax people who are familiar with international taxation issues and whatnot. The thing that I guess I wonder about from a sort of real estate marketing standpoint is that all strikes me as kind of networking, and there's no issue with that, right? And it's no different than a real estate agent tries to network with mortgage providers or contractors or whatever, right? It's service providers that will help the client, right? Is there a difference between networking and strategic social? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
I think it depends on how you use the platform, and I think it also depends on which platform as well.
Okay.
Because I think how you socialize inside of something like Twitter, where it has the tendency to be a lot more public than perhaps something like a LinkedIn, is an important point of differentiation. It depends on which social, I guess, is sort of at least my initial sense of this. Because we see a lot of, I think, networking, or what passes for networking today, I guess, on something like Twitter, where people are perhaps under the illusion that they are building relationships, when in fact, they're just, contributing to the noise. And I think that's a very, very important. That's a very important thing to understand in terms of this strategic networking or strategic social kind of thing. Because if I think about, my first interactions with you two, it wasn't strategitic. It became strategic as our relationship grew, but it wasn't as sort of intentional as that, It became that we sort of moved in similar circles and got to know each other, and then it became, Gaylord can actually, help me with an analytics thing that we're, might be thinking about, or I wonder what Rob would think of this. And it becomes how you leverage that network. And, I don't want to sound too cynical about that kind of stuff, but that is where it becomes strategic, is leveraging those relationships. So I don't know that that's the same thing as strategic.
Well, let me ask Gaylord. I mean, so if we put networking on one end of the spectrum, right, and if we put just your pure social, so going on Facebook and posting pictures of your lunch. The other end of the spectrum, what do you make of the phrase or the concept of sort of strategically social?
Well, I think there's a couple things that always come to mind when these sorts of things come up. One of them is just historically looking at the digital use of digital tools by real estate professionals. Going all the way back to proto-blogging on Active Rain or something like that. There's always been a ton of what we refer to as like agent-on-agent action. Where it's like you've got you're an agent and you've got tons of other agents interacting with your digital stuff. You say, look at me, I've got a zillion comments on my Active Rain blog, and they're all other agents, And for some people, that is strategic because they get all their business through referrals, but that's through referrals from other agents. But that's usually a pretty specific case, and so there's often a lot of once you get keyed into the vanity metrics of like what are my number of followers, what are my number of comments, that kind of thing, that don't put the data in enough context, then you can quickly get to a situation where a real estate agent who is popular with other real estate agents can suddenly look like they've got a wide reach, when in reality they're reaching people that aren't helping their business. So this is a problem that's not new. It's not new with social. I kind of feel like what we're starting to experience is a continuing of the sort of backlash against social media is going to save my business kind of thinking that's been going on for the past couple of years. And strategic social, to me, sounds like a phrase that is just trying to recover the phrase social from the kind of less useful things that have been going on for the past 2 years, I think. And not just in real estate. This is something that I see in other industries as well. I guess the shorter version, if I was to kind of try and back all that up and boil it down a little bit, it's just trying to take the scare quotes off of the word social and say, well, yeah, we can go and talk about our lunch and talk about whatever we're doing, but if we're going to improve our business, we have to do things that improve our business. So we can do that through social activity. I don't see it as being significantly different than old school shaking hands networking. And ideally, the closer it is to that, the more likely you are to develop a stronger relationship that is load bearing. That has some kind of meaning.
When you network with people, though, let's take it in a real world scenario.
Yeah.
If you're choosing to network, you don't shake everybody's hand in the room.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
You choose
some people do.
who you want to shake hands with, and that's where the strategic bit comes in.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to just this sort of scattergun. I'm going to make friends with everybody in the Inman attendees group. Like that's not strategic. Well, not in a sense at least. So we're really talking about perhaps targeting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the method in use is some kind of targeting or segmenting, and saying, oh yeah, I need to meet people who do the international case here, where it's like, oh, I need to meet people who provide valuable services to people who are considering immigrating, and those are the people I'm going to. And it's not like you're rude to other people, but if you've got a choice to shake hands with someone who is more aligned with what you're doing. We've all been to like the cocktail party where the guy goes around the room and hands out his card to every single person in the room. And for some people, that's a strategy, and it must work enough that somebody keeps doing it, But if you have limited time and resources to kind of process all of that, then it's you might want to be more focused. I think most people could benefit from being more focused.
Yeah, I guess you're right. What I was thinking was like networking. Seems fine to me, right? We all do it, and it's sort of natural. And you're in any sort of business, and you network with people that can help you or help your clients, and you can help them. There's no misunderstanding. There's no issue with any of that. And then social, I kind of get too, right? Which is kind of what Matthew was mentioning. The three of us. It's not like we met up at conference or online and decided, I need to target that guy. It was just kind of like chatting, and then
a little bit more.
Once you build that sort of trust relationship, you get to know each other a little bit better. It evolves into things like doing podcasts together. I think I was just creeped out by the phrase strategically social because I got to tell you, it immediately brought to mind like Manti Teo and, the fake girlfriend and like strategically social,
Yeah.
I think it's just trying to recover the word social for sane use. I think that's all it is.
It's it's very easy to be cynical about that kind of stuff, especially because it sounds very sort of Mad Men-like, where that is the person that I'm going to hone in and make sure that I give my card to. It's a very sort of old school kind of approach where, in many ways, they're really talking about making your networking focused and effective. That's really, I think, what it means. And I think that it's a good piece of advice that certainly, a lot of the stuff that we see on something like a Twitter or a Facebook is not that. It's just, let me try to have as many engagements throughout the day because I have some sort of quota to fill based on that. And where it becomes interesting, I think, from a strategic standpoint, I use the word at my peril now based on what you guys are saying, but from a strategic standpoint is when you decide not to respond to somebody. If somebody is trying to sort of network with you and you say, you have to sort of assess whether you want to network back, I guess. So on the other side of it, when somebody doesn't meet your strategic needs, that's an interesting dynamic in terms of how you choose to behave. I think it's something that we're seeing at Cochrane, certainly as we grow in social. Is we have a somewhat loose premise of saying no interaction left behind, but we're doing that as the brand, and it's different when it boils down to an individual. This idea of having to respond to everybody isn't necessarily aligned with this idea of being strategically social. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've got almost a specific example of this too that I can talk about because it's from my own work. And because sometimes it's almost like sometimes by engaging at all at some of these different areas, you can end up causing a problem with your own brand perception or your own perception of yourself or whatever it is. On LinkedIn, I'm typically very, LinkedIn is one of the networks that I rarely allow anybody in unless I've got a really firm grasp of who they are. But typically I've always kind of given a bit of a pass to anyone that lives in my town because it's just not that big, and I just assume, I must have met this guy somewhere, And recently someone sent me a tweet, and they're like, hey, do you know this guy? He's connected to you on LinkedIn. And I kind of looked at the profile, and I was like, oh, I remembered the guy sending in a connection request, and kind of gave it a quick look over at that time. And then when I went and looked at it this time, it was like a totally different thing, and like his description of stuff was like obviously bogus. And I was like, okay, well, this guy, is obviously bogus. And so I, turned off the connection. But it's one of those things to be aware of for those who choose to be, what they call like promiscuous in the number of connections that they have. If you're connected to a bunch of people who are known to be bogus or some kind of problem or whatever, that sends signal as well, And in this case, I was like, oh, geez, I'm glad that my friend double checked with me on it. And I'm like, oh no, actually, I don't remember exactly where I met this guy. He slipped through because he was in Burlington or whatever. So now everybody knows how to like get an automatic connection to Gaylord, right? Just say you're from Burlington. So that I'll have lots of, crazy stuff. But that's something, in that same regard. It's almost like not just strategic in who you do connect with, but strategic in who you don't connect with. And that's a challenging one. I mean, I've got it in my.
I got to ask you this question, Gaylord. I got to ask you this question. So, literally, as you're talking, phrase kind of went through my mind. It's like Facebook hoe.
Yeah.
In other words, like, so are you suggesting that somebody who basically has too many friends, right? Because you look at some of the way that we measure, going back to our original topic, measure influence. Think about clout, right? That we measure measure influence is sort of like by metrics like how many followers do they have, right? How many Facebook friends they have. But almost sounds like what you're proposing is there could be a downside to that, right? Like if you have 3,000 Facebook friends, it's not positive. It's like you're kind of too much out there. You're like a Facebook hoe. I mean,
the problem there, Rob. There's the easy problem on this one is that that influence is contextual, right? The kind of influence that Kim Kardashian has is very specific, and it has almost no bearing on my life, but on someone else's life, she has very strong influence. And so it's always contextual. But the tools that we have available to us for measuring, like the follower count, for example, or the click-through stuff, or almost any web like native metric, is very broad in general and not very context specific. To really get to an understanding of it, like influence is contextual per business, like not even just per industry, but what influential means for Corcoran Group in New York City is different from what influential means to Boardman, Hickok Boardman in Burlington, Vermont. Like it's a very different metric.
Corcoran in Burlington, Vermont.
Yeah, exactly. Or Corcoran in Burlington, Vermont, or Corcoran in wherever else you might be going, and it's contextual by the geography plays on it, and stage of life. If you go into whole like customer decision journey and parts of, there's just so many different places in which it does, and the only metrics we have available to us are these very blunt instruments like follower count, which do a great job for generating.
I completely
revenue.
agree. But let's try and make it interesting and potentially thought-provoking for the listeners who might be realtors.
Right.
But there may be realtors out there. In fact, I know there are realtors out there that have like 3,000-4,000 Facebook friends.
Yeah.
Right? So they meet a customer, they meet a potential client, they meet, they start interacting, they do what they do, right? And they run into somebody who potentially might be a client at some point. So from that person's perspective, so keep in mind this is the consumer. They might be interested in buying a house at some point, but they're not fully in it, and they're starting to see this person come around, kind of maybe in their neighborhood or on Facebook or on Twitter on a geography basis. And I guess what I'll ask you is, do you think that there is a positive correlation or a negative correlation in this day and age today if the agent has 3,000 Facebook friends versus having, say, 30?
I don't think, I don't think we can say. I don't think we're going to know. I think that's going to be contextual based on it. Some people admire celebrity, and having a large number of followers is going to be meaningful to them. Other people don't. Like me personally, I look at it and go, whatever. But I know that there are other people who will be like, oh, this person's got 3,000. Other people. It's going to be different on a case-by-case basis, and this is why it's not strategic, right? Because it's not repeatable.
Well, what do you think, Matthew?
But that metric is very tenuously attached to individual strategic goals because it's going to vary so much.
Yeah. What do you think, Matthew? More or fewer?
I think more.
Okay.
And I know that isn't the sort of prevailing popular view to say, but I think that if let's say you're a brand on Facebook, right, or a person, and you say, well, I want more. Say you have the marketing problem, and you say, I want more people to share what I do, right? Say that's like a marketing problem that you have. Reach becomes a key driver of that. It's not the only driver of that, but it's a key driver of that. The more people that you're connected to, that 0.1% that likes to share what you do allows more people to share stuff. It's 0.1 of 100 versus 30,000. So it's actually something that we've seen in a very direct way at Corcoran. As our presence has grown, so our engagement has grown, and as a result, we're sort of refining the approach and capitalizing on that to the point where we get a lot of engagement now. But reach, a lot of people poo-poo reach in terms of who you're connected to, and of course, Gaylord is absolutely right. It's the quality of who you're connected to is important, but it isn't the exclusive factor of how that stuff works. If you want to have, like I said, your stuff shared, the more people that are potentially exposed to it, and this is sort of the Kim Kardashian model, right? Where they say, whatever it is, 80% of her followers don't even see her posts as they come through in Twitter or Facebook or whatever. But the 20, you're still talking about 20% of whatever million that she has, which is still more than most other brands. So, reach is actually a key indicator of potential activity. And when you're talking about influence, it's sort of playing the numbers game where you say, well, it's 0.1, but it's of a much bigger number. So overall, it's more effective than actually having fewer, closer ties. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. One part of that I think that's important to clarify is that the case that you're describing is a marketing one and a branding one, and the case that Rob was starting with. Robert, how formal. The point Rob was starting with is more on like the sales marketing, like the perception of an individual of the different thing, and that's part of why I said it depends.
Sure. And I totally appreciate that I answered a different question.
Yeah. Well, no,
I don't think so. I mean, I think that was sort of, you guys have both answered the same question, right?
Yeah.
You really did, right? Because in real estate, the personal and the marketing kind of they cross over with each other.
They do.
Right? I mean, you think about the whole notion of farming your sphere and all, what it is that real estate agents do. A lot of times they have personal relationships that then transfer into professional relationships, and they go back into being a personal relationship. So I think it's somewhat unique. I mean, they actually cross both worlds, and I think it is interesting that you guys both gave answers to essentially the full spectrum of the experience that an agent has. That it's the personal as well as the professional. That it's the marketing, the branding, as well as sort of personal influence, I guess. So I think it's awesome, actually.
I'm sort of firmly of the belief that the bigger your sphere is, the more statistically likely it is that you're going to have evangelists. Even if whatever the percentage is, if you have enough people, you statistically have people that celebrate your work at a higher quantity.
So you're saying it's the opposite of the idea that you can have breadth or you can have depth. You're saying
I think it's
with
both.
this.
I think with breadth overall, it's sort of like the long tail idea, right? It's like with the more reach that you have, statistically, you have more of those closer ties.
Mm. So bigger is better when it comes to strategically social.
No. I'm saying it is another way that it works, right? Because I don't disagree with the 30 people that you're very close to and that are in your immediate sphere, but there's more than one sphere. I guess that's really what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Those 30 people, they'll go and evangelize, everything that you're doing, but statistically, you're going to have more of those kinds of people, even if they're sort of indirectly linked to you, if you have larger reach.
Gotcha.
Right?
Makes sense. Well, gentlemen, I think we're kind of coming up on our time limit here. Since I was the only one who didn't make it, I'm going to ask you sort of your closing thoughts with, what am I asking you? What was the most fun or interesting thing that you saw or did at Inman, New York, this year? Gaylor, maybe you first.
Well, to be honest, the thing that I enjoyed the most about my trip, well, there were a bunch of things, right? I had a bunch of small dinners with people that was like my focus when I was in town this time. Like, I didn't want to go anywhere where I couldn't hear anybody talk. And that approach yielded a number of fantastic conversations. But one of them that I particularly enjoyed, it was a totally not real estate related event at all. I went to the Explorers Club and caught a lecture about the Voyager expeditions, the spacecraft that are out at the edge of the galaxy. So it's like a NASA thing. And my companion for that event was the Voyager thing is the expedition that has the golden record on it, that has like all these people, saying things in different languages, or on that spacecraft. And my companion for that evening was the voice of the Portuguese voice on that record, and that was a really a fun evening for me. But the main thing, real estate related, was just having a lot of small hangouts, and that really was great.
Cool, Matthew. Most fun, interesting thing.
I really wish that I'd done more of what you're talking about, Gaylor, because the idea of, going for dinner with 250 of your closest friends is, I certainly need to move past that too, much as I love each and every one of them. But for me, I presented at Inman, and that's always fun because, especially with the sort of home audience, or sort of playing on our home turf. That was a really interesting thing. I had about 15 minutes to lay out 3 strategic objectives for 2013, and there was a video made of it, and I didn't realize that something had happened until I watched the video afterwards. And it was, for me personally, it was a lot of fun. There was a moment where I called out, to the slacktivism point that we were talking about earlier. There's a moment when I called out the effectiveness of Facebook groups, and I call it out in reference to the syndication discussion about where agents or where real estate professionals should spend their time. And I sort of say, look at what Zillow and Trilia's developer blogs are posting, because then you'll be able to see exactly where the puck is moving. You'll be able to see exactly what they're thinking about and what they're working on and the problems they're trying to solve. And less time, and this is the phrase that I used, less time discussing it ad nauseum inside of impotent Facebook groups. And I didn't realize this until afterwards, but there was a gasp. There was a gasp in the crowd that got picked up on the camera that I didn't realize really sort of as it was happening. Because it sort of quickly, but
that's great.
So the most fun thing you did was shock a number of attendees. It was a very interesting experience to watch back. Let me definitely put it that way.
Now that he's addicted to it, he's going to be writing blog posts in the style of Rob Hunt.
I was going to say, careful, man.
Well, it is a topic that I feel very, very strongly about, and because we're really talking about effectiveness of time and resources, as we've discussed many times in the past. But I also really enjoyed the latte vision.
We got to talk about that in a future podcast.
I don't necessarily agree with that perspective, but it certainly got me thinking. That's for sure.
Hold that thought. We know we have a future episode of this podcast. We have to talk about latte because it is really interesting, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Whether you agree with it or not, it is fascinating. It's a fascinating proposal, and like I say, I think the vision part of it is the easy bit. I think it's really more a discussion about execution beyond the real estate industry. And I should probably just leave it like that until we...
Yeah, just save it for the podcast, brother. So one last question before we go. Did either of you attend RE Bar Camp?
I did not, no.
I missed it this year. I feel bad, but I did miss it.
Well, no, I was just curious because I actually wrote a big post after San Francisco that I felt like the whole bar camp thing had died, but apparently it was a big one.
I think that the New York bar camp crew, I think, keeps that spirit alive.
Yeah.
Partially because they have that Lucky Strike Club, and you got guys like, Phil and Patrick. I think they're able to maintain the vibe. I didn't go to this year, but in the past, I found them to be, still in the right spirit.
Yeah, I heard it was very big and very successful this year. I heard good things about it.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, gentlemen, I think we are out of time. Of course, we could obviously keep talking for a few more hours, but I think our audience might actually, chipmunk the rest of it. So with that, it was wonderful to speak to you after little bit of a hiatus after Inman and all. And we'll see you in the next one.
Sounds good.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
3, that's a magic number. Yes, it is. It's the magic number.